Alyssa Santo, and the topic of today is the Federalist Papers, number 23, written by Alexander Hamilton. The moment in time revolving around the Constitution consisted of diverse controversies, ceaseless altercations, and the emergence of two of the most infamous political parties, Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. During this time period, there was one side, the Federalists, who would attack the deficiencies of the Articles of Confederation and were yearning to ratify and demand a new constitution. However, on the opposite side of the spectrum, the Anti-Federalists, there were those who nonetheless opposed the idea of ratifying the Constitution, suggesting that this process would lead to a national government that is severely too powerful. Furthermore, during the rise of these two contrasting parties, certain forms of propaganda and documents were distributed to the people of the United States. These documents were illustrated in order to persuade the people to take a stand and choose a side that would construct a beneficial future for their country. In particular, one piece, known as the Federalist Papers, were a series of 85 essays influencing and urging the citizens of New York to authorize the new United States Constitution. These papers were written by three of the most well-known Federalists, including Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. Particularly, Alexander Hamilton constructed 52 of the essays within the piece itself. More specifically, he wrote essay number 23, which analyzes and resolves the controversies surrounding the national government and the role it shall pursue in the future. In an excerpt from the Federalist Papers, Hamilton writes as follows. One important issue in particular that Hamilton raised in his piece was to have the new national government control and regulate commerce among the states and between nations. Hamilton claims that the insufficiency of consistent trade regulation has caused the states to become less unified and more independent. As for Hamilton and other Federalists, the issue and lack of any power or government to regulate commerce had created a terrible situation for the country as a whole. Hamilton believes that for any nation to benefit overall, the regulation of commerce must occur within that country. Hamilton makes such a point to bring up this problem because it was never addressed in the Articles of Confederation. Much of the articles focused more of their attention upon the present structure of the United States rather than unifying the states as a whole and focusing on what the country will become in the future and years to follow. Hamilton made a distinct point to note this issue in his essay and also make it a point to finally resolve this issue in some way or another. From Hamilton's standpoint, his principal question to his country was, if the national government had no power whatsoever to regulate trade and commerce, then who did? He was making a distinct point to the people of his country that it is significantly important for the government to regulate this trade, or perhaps the country will enter a deep period of decadence. However, as many probably already know, Hamilton was extremely stubborn. He wanted what he wanted, and he was willing to pursue his desires and goals no matter who stepped in his way. So his stubbornness and obstinate personality definitely urged him to pursue his beliefs towards this topic, regardless of the opinions around him. In another excerpt from his piece, Hamilton writes, how the country should best defend itself against foreign attacks or aggression. This concept lies under the category of common defense, which Hamilton continuously makes a point about within his piece. Towards the beginning of the essay, Hamilton notes the essential factors existing for the common defense, including raising an army, build and equip fleets, prescribe rules for the government of both, direct their operations, and provide for their support. In other words, the government should be granted the right and authority to be responsible for the common defense of the country as a whole. Now, this includes, again, raising an army, building and preparing their own navy, managing their own procedures, and providing their own country with a strong military support. So when war arises or certain altercations with other nations, they have a strong military backup to protect the country, not separate states. Although the articles recognize the means for a national army, it failed and lacked the necessity to carry it out. In order to raise men and money, it relied solely on making requisitions upon the states for quotas of men. The system, however, failed tremendously because it created a great amount of competition between the states rather than some type of unification. This attempt at creating some type of protection for the country resulted in much confusion, undisciplined troops, and very high expenses. Furthermore, although Hamilton proposed this idea and concept within his piece, another infamous Federalist, James Madison, mentioned previously, stated this idea in Federalist Papers number 41, when he mentioned that the powers falling within the first class are those of declaring war and granting letters of marque, approving armies and fleets, of regulating and calling forth the militia, of levying and borrowing money. Now, he too made a distinct point that the federal government should be granted more power than what is simply stated in the articles. Upon suggesting the idea of a national military for the country, Hamilton makes a distinct point. That is, the means ought to be proportioned to the end. In other words, Hamilton means that if it is agreed that the national government is responsible for the safety of the people, then it must have the power to raise an army, build and equip fleets, as well as provide protection for the country overall. Hamilton was an influential and authoritative Federalist during this time. He was an educated man and certainly used this to pursue his position and entice his country to follow in his beliefs. So a third excerpt from the papers is as follows. A third argument Hamilton raises within his essay is that the laws of the federal government must be extended to its people. In this case, he feels as though in order to find and accomplish success within the country, the people and states should be unified as a whole, not as separate states. For example, in one case, Hamilton argues that we must discard the fallacious scheme of quotas and requisitions as equally impracticable, and unjust. In other words, he is referring to the articles which constructed each state to form their own navy by enlisting their own men, as mentioned previously. However, Hamilton argues against this idea, urging for a drastic change where the federal government reaches out to its people, creating something national rather than independent. Hamilton is speaking up to fight against this statement by saying that the national government needs to stand up and gather these states together in order to form something that will result in success and unification for the country. So here's a final excerpt from the piece. Hamilton states the overall importances and significances of the national government. That is, the government should be granted the power to pass all laws and make all regulations, which refer to the common safety of the Union. Hamilton makes a distinct point within the excerpts that if people disagree and argue that the federal government should not be given these powers, then they are painfully fallacious and incorrect. Hamilton argues that the Articles created something that immediately needs to be stopped and fixed. For example, not creating a national military, or perhaps refusing to grant the national government the ability to regulate trade and commerce. It was these specific and significant issues stated in the Articles that enticed Hamilton to take a stand and publicize his own opinions and issues that were to be solved. For Hamilton, the Articles created through his eyes a government that would never conquer success, or achieve it for that matter. However, it was his responsibility to solve these problems immediately, which he willingly states in the excerpt above. In summary, Hamilton certainly raised some very important points and arguments in not just this particular essay, but others written by himself as well. He provided the people with the knowledge they need to see why the Constitution must be ratified. Not only that, but Hamilton continued to explain why his particular position and ideas would help the country benefit in the long run. As Pierce Butler once said, we must follow the examples of Solon, who gave the Athenians not the best government he could devise, but the best government they could receive.
LA got the people saying, Brooklyn saying, Hacienda saying, Vegas saying, Rio saying, Tokyo saying, Down Under saying, Miami saying, Jamaica. Every city, every state, every country you know, all around the globe. Every city, every state, every country you know, this is how it goes. Tell them where I'm at, from the plaque to the everything fat, got muzzled on a track, my girls all stacked. When I roll down the window, let me know where you at.